The massive Kithara warship, Bloodclaw, hung in Earth's orbit like a crimson Death Star, its hull gleaming with the blood-red metal that had witnessed the extinction of countless civilizations. Commander Vex Tar stood at the observation deck, his 12-foot frame dwarfing the alien technology around him. His razor-sharp claws, each one capable of slicing through steel, drummed impatiently against the reinforced viewing glass as he studied the blue-green world below. Finally, a worthy addition to our trophy collection? Vextar rumbled, his voice carrying the deep, predatory growl that had terrorized 1,000 worlds. His crimson eyes, evolved for tracking prey across any terrain, scanned the planetary data streaming across holographic displays, population centers, military installations, technological capabilities, all of it painted a picture of laughably weak prey. The bridge around him bustled with activity as dozens of Kithara warriors prepared for what they believed would be their easiest hunt in decades. Their natural armor plating, thick as starship hull metal, gleamed under the red lighting. Each warrior stood over 10 feet tall, their muscular frames built for one purpose: the perfect kill. They had evolved on a death world where only the strongest survived, where every creature was either predator or prey, and the Kithara had climbed to the absolute top of that food chain. "Look at these pathetic creatures," Vextar snarled, gesturing at the human settlements visible on the tactical display. "No claws, no fangs, no natural armor. They can barely run faster than our younglings crawl. How did such weak beings even survive long enough to build cities?" His lieutenant, Skarmoth, approached with hunting eagerness, gleaming in his yellow eyes. "Commander, our bioscanners show they have no enhanced reflexes, no combat adaptations, no pack-hunting instincts. They're not even proper predators. They eat plants and raise other animals for food like scavengers. The Kithara had built their entire civilization around the hunt. Every aspect of their technology, their culture, their very existence, revolved around finding new prey and proving their dominance through the kill. They had perfected the art of warfare across the galaxy, studying each species before systematically hunting them to extinction. It was their way, their purpose, their divine right as apex predators. Vextar's claws extended with anticipation as he imagined the easy slaughter to come. Deploy the first hunting packs to their largest population centers, start with their military installations, eliminate their pathetic defenses first, then we can enjoy hunting the civilians at our leisure. 3 hours later, the sleek Kithara dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling meteors. Captain Hyunwoo Park of the Seoul Defense Force watched through his binoculars as the alien craft touched down in the city center, their hulls still glowing from atmospheric entry. He had been a soldier for 15 years, had seen combat in 3 different conflicts, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. "All units, this is Captain Park," he spoke into his radio, trying to keep his voice steady. "Unknown hostiles have landed in Sector 7. Approach with extreme caution." The first Kithara warrior emerged from the dropship, and Park felt his blood turn to ice. The creature stood nearly twice his height, its body covered in what looked like natural armor plating that gleamed like polished metal. Its arms ended in claws that could have been forged by the devil himself, and when it moved, every step radiated lethal grace and predatory confidence. Lieutenant Min-ho Kim's voice crackled through the radio, barely controlled panic bleeding through his training. "Sir, we've engaged the hostiles. Our rifles are having minimal effect. The bullets are bouncing off their armor. Oh God, it just tore through Sergeant Choi's squad like they were paper dolls." Park pressed himself against the concrete barrier, his heart hammering as he watched more Kithara warriors pour from their ships. These weren't just aliens. They were living weapons, evolution's perfect killing machines made manifest. Every movement was calculated. Every gesture spoke of absolute confidence in their superiority. Sergeant Ji-won Lee had positioned herself on the 3rd floor of a damaged building, watching through her scope as a Kithara hunter stalked through the street below. The creature moved with the fluid grace of a jungle cat, but there was something even more terrifying about its deliberate pace. It wasn't rushing, wasn't frantic. It was savoring the hunt. "This is Sergeant Lee," she whispered, into her radio. "I have eyes on one of them. It's playing with us. It knows exactly where our people are hiding. But it's taking its time, like it's enjoying the fear. The truth was becoming horrifyingly clear to the human defenders. They weren't facing an army. They were being hunted by predators who saw them as nothing more than sport. The Kithara moved through Seoul streets like sharks through bloody water, picking off human soldiers with casual ease. Back on the Bloodclaw, Vextar reviewed the initial battle reports with satisfaction. The humans were falling exactly as predicted, quickly, helplessly, with barely any resistance worth mentioning. But as the hours passed and more data came in, something began to puzzle the Kithara commander. Sub-Commander Krell, Vextar called, to his aide. "Explain these movement patterns to me. The prey should be scattering in panic. But look at these tracking reports. They're regrouping, coordinating their retreats." Krell examined the data with confusion. "Perhaps they have some sort of hive mind intelligence, Commander. Some species develop collective survival instincts when facing extinction, but Vextar had hunted hive minds before. This was different. The humans weren't just running away randomly. They were falling back in organized patterns, sharing information, adapting their tactics even as they were being slaughtered. It was almost as if they were studying their hunters even while being hunted. "Impossible," Vextar growled, dismissing the troubling thoughts. The Kithara were perfect predators. They had never failed to conquer prey, never met a species that could challenge their dominance. These weak, soft humans would be no different. They were simply postponing the inevitable. 3 weeks had passed since the Crimson ships first darkened Earth's skies, and the underground bunker beneath Seoul's subway system had become humanity's most important laboratory. Major Sung-Ho Choi wiped the sweat from his forehead as he leaned over the dissection table, studying the first intact Kithara corpse they had managed to recover. The alien warrior lay motionless, its massive 12-foot frame still intimidating even in death. "This changes everything," Dr. Eunji Kim whispered, her hands trembling slightly as she pointed to the detailed scan results glowing on her tablet. "Look at these joint connections. Their armor isn't one solid piece, it's segmented plates that overlap. But right here, at the shoulders, elbows, and knees, there are gaps. Tiny ones, but gaps nonetheless." The makeshift laboratory buzzed with activity as teams of scientists and soldiers worked side by side, something that would have been impossible just a month ago. Corporal Jae-min Ryu had been tracking Kithara movement patterns for weeks, sleeping only in short bursts between observation shifts. His notebooks were filled with detailed sketches and timing charts that told a story the aliens never intended to reveal. "They're creatures of habit," Jae-min explained to the gathered team, his voice hoarse from exhaustion but his eyes bright with discovery. "Every hunting pack follows the exact same pattern. 3 warriors, always in a triangle formation. The leader takes point. The other 2 flank left and right exactly 12 meters apart. They approach from elevated positions when possible, always checking the same sightlines." Private So Young Park had been studying the alien technology recovered from crash sites, her background in engineering proving invaluable in understanding their weapon systems. "Their plasma rifles have a charge cycle of exactly 2.3 seconds between shots," she reported, holding up a partially disassembled alien weapon. "And their armor's energy field fluctuates every time they fire. That's when they're most vulnerable." The breakthrough came when Sergeant Dong-Hyun Ko discovered something that would change the entire course of the war. While reviewing security footage from the early battles, he noticed that the Kithara always paused at the same moment before making their final strike. A brief hesitation that seemed to be some kind of ritual behavior, perhaps a way of savoring their victory. "They're not just predators," Ko realized, his voice filled with grim understanding. "They're sport hunters. They enjoy the kill so much that they always take that extra second to appreciate their dominance. That's going to be their downfall." The trap was set in the ruins of Myeongdong district, where the twisted remains of shopping centers and office buildings created the perfect maze of hiding spots and ambush points. Intelligence reports indicated that Hunter Pack Theta 7 would be conducting their regular patrol through the area at exactly 14:30 hours, following the same route they had taken for the past 6 days. Lieutenant Hyo-jin Nam positioned her team in the collapsed department store, their weapons loaded with the new armor-piercing rounds that weapons specialist Chan Woo Lee had developed. The bullets were smaller than standard ammunition, but designed to slip through the gaps in Kithara armor plating at precisely the right angle. "Remember," Nam whispered into her radio, "wait for the pause. When they stop to savor the moment, that's when we strike. Aim for the joint vulnerabilities, shoulders, elbows, knees. Make every shot count." The Kithara hunting pack approached, exactly as predicted, their massive forms moving through the debris-strewn streets with predatory confidence. Pack leader Vorgath led the formation, his scarred armor telling the story of countless successful hunts across the galaxy. His companions, Kellerin and Thaxmore, maintained their perfect spacing as they had been trained since childhood. Private So Young Park crouched in the ruins of a coffee shop, her finger hovering over the detonator that would trigger the carefully placed explosives. Her heart hammered in her chest as she watched the aliens approach the kill zone, their claws scraping against concrete with each step. The Kithara reached the intersection where human intelligence predicted they would pause for their ritual moment of dominance. Vorgath raised his clawed hand, signaling his pack to stop as he scanned the area with predatory satisfaction. This was the moment they always savored, the calm before the slaughter, the pause that let them appreciate their role. As apex predators, that pause lasted exactly 1 second too long. So Young triggered the explosives, and the world erupted in fire and debris. The carefully calculated blast didn't kill the Kithara. Their armor was too strong for that. But it stunned them, disrupted their formation, and exposed exactly the joint vulnerabilities that Dr. Kim had identified. Sergeant Koh's team opened. Fire from 3 different positions, their modified weapons sending armor-piercing rounds through the gaps in alien plating with surgical precision. The Kithara, for the first time in their species' history, found themselves outmatched by supposedly inferior prey. Vorgath fell first, his massive frame crashing to the ground as rounds penetrated the vulnerable joint at his shoulder. Kellerin managed to return fire, but his shots went wide as more human bullets found their mark. Thaxmore tried to retreat, but Lieutenant Nam's team had positioned themselves to cut off all escape routes. Within minutes, all 3 Kithara warriors lay, motionless in the rubble-strewn intersection. The hunt was over, but this time, the humans had been the hunters. Back aboard the Bloodclaw, Commander Vexitar stared at the casualty report with growing horror. An entire hunting pack, 3 of his finest warriors, eliminated by creatures they had dismissed as helpless prey. The report made no sense. How could such weak beings kill perfect predators? "Impossible," he snarled, his claws leaving gouges in the metal display console. "They have no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced reflexes. How did they defeat trained Kithara hunters?" But the evidence was undeniable. The humans weren't just fighting back randomly. They were learning from each encounter, adapting their tactics, exploiting weaknesses that the Kithara had never even realized they possessed. Each battle taught them something new, and they were using that knowledge to turn the hunters into the hunted. Sub-Commander Krell approached cautiously, knowing that his commander's rage could turn deadly in an instant. "Sir, perhaps we underestimated their intelligence. They seem to be studying our tactics and developing countermeasures." Vextar's roar of fury echoed through the ship's corridors, a sound that had once struck terror into the hearts of countless alien species. But now, for the first time in Kithara history, that roar carried a note of something they had never experienced before: doubt. The perfect predators were learning that their prey could evolve faster than they could adapt, and that realization would shake the foundations of their entire civilization. The underground bunker beneath Busan's port district had become the nerve center of humanity's most ambitious counteroffensive. Colonel Insu Lee stood before a wall covered in detailed maps, photographs, and tracking charts that would have made any detective proud. Red strings connected various points across the city, creating a web of information that told the story of alien movement patterns with frightening precision. "Look at this," Colonel Lee said, pointing to a series of timestamps marked on the central map. "Hunter 7 arrives at the old fish market every Tuesday at exactly 09:15 hours. He spends 12 minutes searching the same 3 buildings, always in the same order. Then he moves to the harbor, checks the warehouse district, and returns to his base by the same route he came. The assembled officers stared at the data with a mixture of amazement and growing confidence. Lieutenant Hee-Jin Park had been the one to first notice the patterns, spending sleepless nights tracking individual Kithara warriors through binoculars and camera feeds. Her notebooks were filled with detailed observations that read like a nature documentary about deadly predators. "They're not adapting," she explained, her voice filled with excitement. "Every single one of them follows the exact same behavioral patterns day after day. Hunter 3 always approaches buildings from the southeast corner. Hunter 12 never enters a structure without checking the roof first. They're so confident in their superiority that they've never learned to change their tactics." Specialist. Woo Jin Choi had spent the last week preparing the most elaborate trap in human military history. The old Jagalchi fish market had been transformed into a maze of hidden sensors, remote-controlled explosives, and carefully positioned sniper nests. Every entrance, every hiding spot, every possible escape route had been mapped and rigged with detection equipment. "The beauty of it is that we're using their own hunting instincts against them," Choi explained, as he showed the team his handiwork. "Hunter 7 will arrive at exactly 09:15, just like he has for the past 3 weeks. He'll check Building A first, then Building B, then Building C, but this time, we'll be ready for him." Captain Yeon-Soo Kim adjusted her sniper rifle scope from her position on the 7th floor of a partially destroyed apartment building. She had been tracking Hunter 7 for 2 weeks, learning his habits, studying his movements, understanding his behavior better than the alien probably understood it himself. Through her scope, she could see the entire market district spread out below like a game board, where she knew every move before it happened. "All units, this is Overwatch," she spoke softly into her radio. "Hunter 7 is approaching from the northeast, exactly on schedule. He's following route pattern Alpha 3, just as predicted. All teams prepare for engagement." Down in the market, Sergeant Kyung-Ho Park crouched behind a fish vendor's stall, his weapon trained on the entrance to Building A. Around him, 11 other soldiers waited in carefully chosen positions, each one covering a specific angle based on weeks of behavioral analysis. They had studied this alien predator so thoroughly that they could predict his next move before he made it. Hunter 7, whose real name was Zekthar in the Kithara language, approached the market district with the casual confidence that had served his species for thousands of years. He stood nearly 13 feet tall, his crimson armor gleaming in the morning sunlight, his razor-sharp claws extended and ready for the kill. In his mind, he was simply conducting another routine patrol through prey territory. The massive alien paused at the market entrance, his predatory senses scanning the area for any signs of human presence. To his enhanced hearing, the district seemed empty. To his keen eyesight, trained to spot prey from vast distances, nothing moved in the shadows. His natural instincts, honed by millions of years of evolution, detected no immediate threats. But those same instincts had become predictable patterns that humans had learned to exploit. Zekthar entered Building A exactly as Lieutenant Park had predicted, his massive frame moving through the doorway with lethal grace. He checked the corners, examined the hiding spots, followed the same search pattern he had used on countless worlds across the galaxy. He was thorough, methodical, and completely unaware that 12 human soldiers were tracking his every movement. "Target is in Building A," whispered Corporal Minjung Lee from her concealed position. "He's checking the storage room now. 30 seconds until he moves to Position 2. The Kithara warrior completed his search of Building A and moved toward Building B, his clawed feet leaving deep gouges in the concrete. Every step was calculated, every movement precise. He was the perfect predator, evolved for the hunt, designed for the kill. But perfection had become predictability, and predictability had become vulnerability. As Zekthar entered Building B, Specialist Choi triggered the first phase of the trap. Motion sensors activated throughout the district, pinpointing the alien's exact location and transmitting the data to every human soldier in the area. For the first time in the war, humans knew exactly where a Kithara warrior was and exactly where he was going next. "Phase 2, execute," Colonel Lee commanded from the bunker, watching the operation unfold on multiple camera feeds. The trap closed around Hunter 7 like the jaws of a massive predator. As he moved from Building B toward Building C, following his predictable pattern, explosive charges detonated in carefully calculated sequences. Not enough to kill him. His armor was too strong for that, but enough to disorient him, separate him from his planned escape routes, and drive him exactly where the humans wanted him to go. Zekthar found himself in the center of the market square, surrounded by buildings. That had become sniper nests. His usual hunting advantages turned into tactical disadvantages. For the first time in his life, the apex predator realized he was being hunted. Captain Kim's voice was steady as she called the shot. "Target acquired! Firing!" The specially designed armor-piercing round struck Zekthar at the vulnerable joint, between his shoulder plates, exactly where Dr. Kim's analysis had indicated weeks earlier. The massive warrior staggered, his predatory confidence shattered along with his armor. 11 more shots followed in rapid succession, each one precisely aimed at the weak points that human observation had identified. The perfect predator fell to his knees, then crashed to the ground, defeated by creatures he had considered nothing more than prey. "Target down," Captain Kim reported, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction that would have been impossible to imagine just weeks earlier. "Package the body for analysis. We've got work to do." Across the globe, similar operations were taking place. In New York, Hunter 15 walked into a trap in Central Park. In London, Hunter 23 found himself surrounded in the ruins of Parliament. In Tokyo, Hunter 8 discovered that his favorite hunting ground had become his tomb. The Kithara warriors, individually powerful but collectively predictable, were being systematically eliminated by human forces who had turned observation into science and science into victory. The hunters had become the hunted, and they didn't even realize it was happening until it was too late. Back aboard the Bloodclaw, Commander Vex's Tar stared at the mounting casualty reports with growing horror. His perfect warriors, his apex predators, his unstoppable hunting machines were falling one by one to creatures that should have been easy prey. The humans weren't just fighting back anymore. They had learned to hunt Kithara with the same methodical precision that Kithara had once used to hunt them. The war was no longer about superior strength or natural weapons. It had become a battle of intelligence, adaptation, and the ability to learn from every encounter. And in that battle, the humans were proving to be the superior predators. The massive Kithara flagship Doomclaw trembled as the High Council gathered. In their most sacred chamber for the first time in 3 centuries, the council hall, carved from the bones of their first conquered world, had witnessed celebrations of countless victories. Today, it would witness something unprecedented in Kithara history, the admission of possible defeat. Commander Vex Tar stood before the 7 members of the High Council, his once proud armor now bearing scars from human weapons. Around the circular chamber, holographic displays showed the devastating losses across Earth's surface. Red markers indicated fallen hunting packs, yellow showed missing scouts, and the growing sea of human-controlled territory was marked in an ominous blue that seemed to spread like infection across their tactical maps. "Explain this catastrophe," growled High Councillor Morgoth, his ancient claws scraping against the bone throne that had been carved from the skull of a massive space leviathan. "How have these soft, weak creatures managed to eliminate over 60% of our ground forces?" Science hunter Kralthak stepped forward, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something the Kithara had rarely experienced: genuine fear. "High Councillor, the humans have done the impossible. They've reverse-engineered our plasma weaponry, our armor technology, even our shield generators. But that's not the worst part." The holographic display shifted to show human modifications to Kithara equipment. Plasma rifles that had been redesigned to fire faster and more accurately, armor plating that had been reinforced with human alloys, shield generators that had been completely rewired to operate at higher efficiency levels. "They've improved our technology," Kralthax continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our weapons are now more effective in their hands than in ours. They've taken our evolutionary advantages and made them obsolete through pure intelligence and adaptation." Meanwhile, deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, General Seo Jun Park stood in the most advanced research facility humanity had ever constructed. The massive underground complex hummed with activity as thousands of scientists and engineers worked around the clock to prepare for the final phase of Earth's counterattack. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Park announced to his assembled team, "we've reached the point where human technology exceeds Kithara capabilities in every measurable category. Our modified plasma weapons have 30% better energy efficiency. Our reverse-engineered shields can deflect their heaviest artillery. And most importantly, we've cracked their fleet communication codes." Dr. Sung-Mi Cho held up a small device that looked like a hybrid between human electronics and alien technology. "This frequency modulator will allow us to disrupt their entire command structure. Their ships rely on synchronized hunting patterns just like their ground forces. If we can break that synchronization, their fleet becomes nothing more than isolated targets." The weapon that would change everything sat in the center of the facility, a massive railgun that had been constructed using principles learned from Kithara technology but improved with human engineering. Captain Junho Yim ran his hand along the sleek barrel, marveling at how human creativity had transformed alien science into something far more deadly. "The electromagnetic pulse this generates will disable every Kithara ship within a 50-kilometer radius," he explained to the gathered military commanders. "Their hulls are designed to withstand plasma weapons and kinetic impacts, but they never evolved protection against focused electromagnetic warfare." At dawn, the final phase of humanity's counterattack began with a coordinated strike that would have been impossible just months earlier. Pilot Tae-Hyun Kim strapped himself into the cockpit of his fighter jet, but this wasn't the same aircraft that had proved useless against Kithara ships during the early days of the invasion. The jet had been completely rebuilt using captured alien technology. Its hull was reinforced with Kithara armor plating. Its weapons systems fired modified plasma bolts that could penetrate alien shields. Most importantly, its navigation system was programmed with detailed analysis of Kithara fleet movements, allowing human pilots to predict enemy maneuvers before they happened. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Flight Leader Kim," he spoke into his radio as his modified fighter climbed toward the Kithara fleet hanging in Earth's orbit. "Remember, these ships follow predictable patterns just like their ground forces. They'll try to form a defensive circle around their flagship. We hit them before they can complete the formation." The space battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human fighters, once laughably inferior to Kithara warships, now danced through the alien fleet with deadly precision. They knew exactly where each enemy ship would move, exactly when their shields would fluctuate, exactly which weapons systems would fire first. Lieutenant Sojin Han guided her, fighter through a complex maneuver that brought her directly behind a Kithara destroyer. Her targeting computer, programmed with weeks of behavioral analysis, predicted the exact moment when the alien ship would attempt to turn. She fired her modified plasma cannons at precisely the right instant, striking the destroyer's shield generator just as it cycled to its weakest setting. The Kithara ship exploded in a brilliant flash of blue and orange flame, its hull torn apart by weapons that had been built using its own technology but improved by human innovation. Commander Vextar watched from the bridge of his flagship as his fleet died around him. Ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds were being destroyed by modified human fighters that shouldn't have posed any threat. His perfect warriors, his apex predators, his genetically superior hunters were being systematically eliminated by creatures they had dismissed as prey. "How?" he roared, his claws leaving deep gouges in the command console. "How are they doing this to us?" The answer came in the form of Captain Min Seo Jung's voice crackling through the Kithara communication system. Somehow, impossibly, the humans had not only broken their codes but learned to broadcast on their frequencies. "This is Captain Jung of the Earth Defense Force." Her voice filled the Kithara bridge with calm authority. "You made one critical mistake. Commander, you assumed that strength meant superiority. You never learned that intelligence beats instinct, that adaptation beats evolution, that cooperation beats competition." Vexitar's ships continued to fall around him as human fighters exploited every weakness, predicted every movement, countered every tactic. His crew of perfect predators stood frozen with shock as they realized they were being hunted by creatures that had evolved into something far more dangerous than natural weapons and armor could ever make them. "You're not apex predators," Captain Jung's voice continued. "You're evolutionary dead ends. You stopped growing, stopped learning, stopped adapting the moment you convinced yourselves you were perfect. We've been adapting our entire existence. That's what makes us human." The Doomclaw shuddered as human fighters targeted its weapon systems with surgical precision. Commander Vexistar finally understood the terrible truth. The humans weren't just prey that had learned to fight back. They were a completely different kind of predator, one that hunted with intelligence instead of instinct, with adaptability instead of strength, with cooperation instead of individual dominance. As his flagship's shields failed and human weapons began tearing through the hull, Vextar realized that the age of the Kithara was over. The galaxy's new apex predators had evolved not through millions of years of natural selection, but through the deliberate choice to never stop learning, never stop growing, never stop becoming something better than they were. The humans had redefined what it meant to be the ultimate predator, and the Kithara were about to learn what it felt like to be prey. The smoldering ruins of the Kithara Command Center stretched across what had once been downtown Seoul, its twisted alien architecture, now nothing more than melted metal and shattered crystal. In the center of this destruction, Admiral Ji-hoon Park stood with quiet authority before the remnants of the most feared predator species the galaxy had ever known. Commander Vextar knelt in the rubble, his once magnificent crimson armor cracked and scorched from the final battle. Around him, the surviving members of his hunting fleet, barely 24 warriors from what had once been a force of over 3,000, remained on their knees in a gesture of submission that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. "Look around you," Admiral Park said, his voice carrying across the silent battlefield. "This is what happens when evolution meets intelligence, when instinct faces adaptation. Your species spent millions of years becoming perfect killers, but you forgot the most important lesson in survival, the ability to change." The weight of defeat hung heavy in the air as Vextar raised his massive head to meet the human admiral's eyes. For the first time in Kithara history, their apex predators understood what it felt like to be prey. The humans had not only beaten them, they had made it look effortless. "We offer terms," Admiral Park continued, pulling out a tablet that displayed the surrender conditions in both human and Kithara languages. "You will withdraw all forces from Earth and human-controlled space immediately. You will provide full reparations for the destruction caused during your invasion. Most importantly, you will submit to ongoing monitoring by human peacekeeping forces to ensure compliance with these terms." Vextar's claws, once capable of tearing through tank armor, now trembled as he reached for the surrender document. His warrior code, built over countless generations of conquest, crumbled as he pressed his claw print to the treaty that would forever mark the Kithara as a defeated species. "We accept," he whispered, the words barely audible through his translator. Device. It was the first time in recorded galactic history that a Kithara had ever surrendered to another species. In the underground research facility that had become humanity's center for alien technology development, Dr. Soo-Jin Lee put the finishing touches on her comprehensive report about the Kithara conflict. The document would become required reading at military academies across human space for generations to come. The Kithara possessed every natural advantage, she dictated to her recording device. Superior strength, natural armor, enhanced reflexes, razor-sharp claws, and millions of years of evolutionary refinement. By every biological measure, they should have been unbeatable, but they made one fatal mistake. They confused physical superiority with true dominance. Her research had revealed the fundamental flaw in Kithara thinking. They had become so dependent on their natural advantages that they never developed the ability to adapt when those advantages were neutralized. Like sharks that had ruled the oceans for eons. They were perfectly designed for one environment but helpless when that environment changed. They hunted like animals, Dr. Lee continued, following instinct, relying on genetic programming, using the same tactics that had worked for millennia. We hunted like humans, with intelligence, creativity, and the absolute refusal to accept that something couldn't be overcome. Captain Yonwoo Shin stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned starship Soul's Vengeance, humanity's first vessel built entirely with reverse-engineered and improved Kithara technology. Through the viewports, he could see the Kithara fleet departing Earth's solar system, their once proud warships now bearing the scars of defeat. "All stations prepare for escort duty," he announced to his crew. "We're going to make sure our former guests find their way home safely and remind them what happens if they ever think about coming back." The human escort fleet that followed, the retreating Kithara, was a testament to how quickly humanity had adapted. Ships that combined the best of both species' technology, weapons that exceeded anything the galaxy had seen before, and most importantly, crews that had learned to think 3 steps ahead of any opponent. Across the galaxy, the news of humanity's victory spread like wildfire through civilizations that had lived in terror of the Kithara for centuries. Thon Zephyria Prime, the crystalline beings who had hidden in their mountain cities for generations, finally emerged to reclaim their world. The gas giant dwellers of Titan 7 began rebuilding the floating cities that Kithara hunting parties had destroyed decades earlier. But for every celebration, there was also growing concern. If humans could defeat the Kithara so decisively, what did that mean for the rest of the galaxy? The quiet species from the small blue world had demonstrated capabilities that made even long-time galactic powers nervous. Ambassador Quan Ho Bei addressed the Galactic Council from humanity's new seat at the center of the Great Assembly Hall, the same seat that had once belonged to the Kithara. His words were measured, but carried an unmistakable weight of authority. "Humanity seeks cooperation, not conquest," he declared to the gathered representatives of hundreds of worlds. "We've proven that intelligence and adaptability can overcome any natural advantage. We hope this lesson encourages peace rather than conflict throughout the galaxy." But privately, every species in the assembly understood the unspoken message. Humanity had redefined what it meant to be an apex predator. They had shown that evolution's gifts meant nothing against a species that refused to stop learning, growing, and adapting. The Kithara monitoring stations that humans established throughout former hunting territories served as constant reminders of the new galactic order. These facilities, staffed by human peacekeepers and equipped with the most advanced detection technology, ensured that the defeated predators would never again threaten innocent civilizations. Lieutenant Hai Young Park monitored one such station from her post overlooking the former Kithara breeding world of Carnox. Through her sensors, she could track every movement of the once mighty hunters as they attempted to rebuild their shattered society. "Station 7 to command," she reported during her daily check-in. "The Kithara are adapting to agricultural work. It's strange seeing 12-foot-tall predators learning to grow crops instead of hunting prey. Maybe there's hope for them yet." The transformation was remarkable to witness. The Kithara, stripped of their role as galactic apex predators, were slowly learning to survive through cooperation rather than domination. It was a painful process for a species that had defined itself through conquest, but it was also proof that even the most rigid evolutionary programming could be overcome. Dr. Sujin Lee concluded her final report with words that would echo through galactic history. The Kithara ruled through fear and physical superiority for millions of years. They believed that natural selection had made them perfect, but perfection is static and evolution never stops. Humanity represents the next stage of predator evolution, not creatures shaped by their environment, but creatures that shape their environment to their will. As Earth's sun set over the rebuilt cities of Sol, humanity stood at the threshold of a new age. They had proven that intelligence could overcome instinct, that adaptation could beat evolution, that cooperation could defeat competition. The galaxy's new apex predators weren't born. They were made through the conscious choice to never stop becoming something better. The age of natural predators was over. The age of conscious evolution had begun. And at its center stood humanity, a species that had turned every disadvantage into strength, every defeat into wisdom, every enemy into a teacher. The quiet world in the outer spiral arm had produced the galaxy's most dangerous predators, not through millions of years of natural selection, but through the simple refusal to accept that anything was impossible to overcome. The end.